Welcome to the FMCG In-Crowd, where people come together to talk about topics that matter to the FMCG industry.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the FMCG In-Crowd. So for those of you who've not joined us before, this is an IRI podcast series which aims to bring together people from across the world of FMCG for interesting and topical conversation. I'm your host, Chloe Humphreys-Page, and I'm excited today because I have a great guest who has a really inspirational story to share. So welcome to the founder of the macro-friendly ready meal brand, Jim Kitchen, Segun Akinwoleola. Hello, Segun.
Thank you, Chloe. How are you doing? You all right?
I'm okay, thank you. And did I get that surname right?
You did. Spot on. Perfect.
Excellent. Well done, me. Okay, so let's just start at the beginning then. So tell me your story. How was Jim Kitchen born?
So Jim Kitchen was born because of my frustration of, kind of the gym world and not being able to access healthy ready meals within supermarkets. So to kind of even take a few steps back, actually. So I grew up in an area in East London called Forest Gate. And at that time, we were always just, as youngsters, going to the gym and really just enjoying life in the gym. So I always knew that there was going to be something that I did within the fitness world, but had no idea what. And I always had this entrepreneur kind of streak within me. So I thought, it's time to try and go off and do my own thing after working at a number of different companies. And that, like I say, that is where the Jim Kitchen was born. I was stood at a supermarket fixture in 2017 with the rise of sports nutrition, brands like Grenade, Fulfill, and I just couldn't understand why that sports nutrition category wasn't represented within the ready meals category, and went on a long journey to try and create that, really.
Okay, and you probably made that sound way simpler than it actually was. So I stand in front of the fixtures in supermarkets and feel a sense of frustration, but I have not yet taken that to create my own brand. So just talk me through how you even got to that point. What were the steps?
So actually, I've worked in FMCG for probably about 10 years. So I worked at companies like Coty, who are a celebrity fragrances company, Revlon, Cow Brands, and I'd worked there as an account manager. So it was always managing accounts, customers like Tesco, Morrison's, Sainsbury's, Boots, for instance. So I'd already had a bit of account management experience. I then decided after that I was actually going to go and work for a smaller company, which was called Life Health Foods. They owned a couple of brands, Up and Go, which is an Australian breakfast drink, and Nutribrex, which is a gluten-free cereal. And there it was like real startup life. It was no distribution. It was, going out there selling this dream to the retailers to try and get these products on shelf. And it was so much fun. And that kind of gave me this insight into actually there's a new world. And when I was looking at what my next opportunities were, actually, what I wanted to do was go into football coaching, actually. Didn't even want to stay within kind of FMCG. But because I was already a coach and I did my coaching qualifications and stuff like that. But then an opportunity presented itself where I went to go and so I just started doing some coaching, but then I went to go and work with the Black Farmer. And the Black Farmer, really entrepreneurial guy, I'm sure you probably know him, a guy called Wilfred Emmanuel Jones. And I worked for him part-time whilst I was doing this. And, I presented this idea to him. I said, look, the Jim Kitchen, I know there's a gap. I'm sure that, we can do something together. What do you think?
And what's interesting about your story, I suppose, is it's almost like a perfect storm in a way, isn't it? So you've got an interest in going to the gym, being healthy. As it happens, so had a big wave of people in the rest of the industry, and so you were really then you were right on trend, really, weren't you? So was that luck, that timing, or did you think this is now, the time is now?
Yeah, do you know what? So I think it was more the time is now. So the things that I saw were mentioned previously. So the rise in sports nutrition and those brands and retailers actually creating shelves for this, and it was unheard of. It was all D2C before, but then products were popping up in food to go which said protein all over them, for instance. And then the other trend that I saw was the fact that a lot of people started to meal prep at home, and it was almost like, well, do customers want to be meal prepping on a Sunday evening, taking up all of their time to eat the same thing every day? Probably not. And you then start to see the likes of companies that actually sold meal prep rising. So for me, it was almost like, well, everybody goes into the supermarket. So they're clearly leaving the supermarket to actually go and purchase products elsewhere, or to go home and meal prep and scratch cook. So that ready meals fixture clearly is declining. And at the time, it was actually declining as well, particularly within health. So it was almost like the time is now. It's just trying to put all of those pieces together in manufacturers, suppliers, all of that kind of bit and obviously get a retailer listing was the hard bit, really. But knowing the time was now was the easy bit.
Okay, and we'll come on to the retail listing bit in a moment, because I do really want to probe on that. But so looking back on your journey, thinking about what were the difficult bits and the easier bits. So what if other people were listening who were in the early days of creating their own brand, what were their highs and lows from your experience?
Oh gosh, so I guess before we launched, it was all really, really hard, really, because I guess in trying to find a manufacturer, that was the first big challenge. And we had people that we worked with where the product wasn't right, where samples would come and they'd be completely destroyed, or the recipes weren't right, the nutritionals weren't right. So getting that proposition spot on was really, really hard. And even in the early days, we were going with a concept that was just going to be just add your carbs to it, and it was a take on ready meals that kind of people like M&S do, where they sell all the individual components separately. But it was almost like, if you're not going into M&S, then the market's not at that stage yet. So actually it was then bringing it back home to, how do we change this proposition so that it's an all-round proposition that we can launch, and then we can look at evolving it further out. So even in the early stages, the proposition started for one thing, changed to something completely different. We then found a manufacturer that we work with, and we're the first brand to actually work with them. And it was great because we've just been on such a great journey with those guys in just developing it, and it's been a great partnership. And I feel like that's part of the luck in finding someone that didn't have a brand, backed us, we backed them, and almost it's just created a great partnership now ongoing, and we're growing consistently as a result.
So that was one of your highs, is just finding the right partner,
100%.
to produce the meals.
And I guess the lows were obviously where we were just, I thought we'd had a good product, and I'd taken that product that I thought was good to, retailers, and they've said, why are you doing that? Actually, the market's not ready for it. Maybe you should rethink it. And we spent, kind of 2 years just going backwards and forwards doing that. And at some point you think, do you know what, can I keep on doing this, or do I still keep going? But knowing for me and knowing for the customers that I'd spoken to, and for the amount of times that I'd spent in the gym and out of the gym speaking to actually individual customers, I knew that there's an opportunity to launch something great here.
Thinking about then those interactions that you had with retailers, what were the kind of key turning points? So you went to them in the early days, and presumably there were knockbacks and the various iterations of conversations. What were the key kind of turning points in those conversations? I'm looking for like the key nuggets of insight that switched the retailer onto thinking, now we're interested.
Yeah, so I've had meetings with every single retailer in the UK, basically, in the early days, and I guess the thing that kind of almost made Asda say, yes, we need to do this, is because they could see that they didn't have a brand within it. So we almost launched as a bit of a trial, because there was no health brand. They listened to what I said about, kind of almost the meal prep shopper, the shoppers that are going to the QSRs nowadays, which is like Leon and kind of those restaurants popping up. The fact that sports nutrition exists. They'd heard all three of those points, and they were like, actually, we can see this as a great opportunity. We can see that, it was almost that we want to bring a new shopper into your category, and wherever this brand launches, new shoppers will come in because there is no solution for them. So they believed that, and they gave us a trial in like 100 stores. And then from there, it just, absolutely blew everybody away, and has been growing ever since. More SKUs, more stores, more ranges, etc.
So that's interesting. So it's understanding the target market, obviously, but then it's convincing the retailer about the incremental footfall that will come in as a result of that. So Jim Kitchen you were so convinced Jim Kitchen was a footfall driver because there was this gap that then it took a retailer just, I suppose, taking a bit of a punt.
That's it. And the good thing about us is, once again, it's everything is timing. We had a young buyer, a young senior buyer anyway, who just really got it. He was also a personal trainer, nutritionist. So he was like, look, this is spot on. This is spot on what the Asda customer needs, and also what Asda need to bring in this new shopper. So yeah, from there it was like all the lights were just on. Really, it was just about they needed to play it safe because it's a fresh proposition. So as opposed to launching us in every single store everywhere, it was like let's do it small, few SKUs, some stores, and then build it. And yeah, it's proven really well, and that's where then obviously Co-op started to see our success after presenting to them, and yeah, Co-op then came on board as well, which is great.
And I suppose it'd be interesting to understand what the barriers are. I don't know how much you can divulge, but what the barriers would be from other retailers who presumably can see the success that's happening in the retailers where you're stocked, but are for some reason still not stocking. I wonder what the barriers are.
Yeah, so I guess from what we're hearing, the barriers tend to always be space. Space, and also still just taking a risk on what they'd consider a new brand. So, in 3, 4, 5 years' time, the story will probably be different because obviously we've grown so significantly. But for now, the barriers are all around space and around, the macro trend in cutting space back as opposed to growing space further. So, and the priority to focus more towards own label, which, yeah, obviously I don't agree with as a brand owner, because in order to bring new shoppers in, they need brands.
I think one of the things I do want to touch on is I came into contact with you because of the connection through AdSalt. So
Yeah.
what was your relationship with the guys at AdSalt?
Yeah, so I'd met Sam through kind of a mutual friend, and I didn't know anything about AdSalt at the time. And for me, it was great because I didn't know, like I said, I didn't know Sam previously, and to hear that, he was sales director at Mars, I was like, this is an inspirational guy that I wish I'd met before, because there are a very small number of black people in any of these positions. I met Wilfred Emmanuel Jones at the Black British Business Awards, who is the Black Farmer. And there I was almost like, wow, there's another person in FMCG that's running their own business. So it almost was like, this is great. I need to connect more with him. And yeah, we just connected, and we really just started speaking about my business, the success we've had so far, the challenges. And we spoke about what he was trying to achieve, in AdSalt, in terms of the brand incubator that he's got, the consultancy that he's got, the mentoring program. So, and I just think that these things are fantastic, because it goes back to school and college, where I didn't grow up knowing that FMCG even existed as an industry, let alone to become a national account manager or a brand owner. You really, really do take for granted and forget the fact that you can walk into a supermarket and pick up a product, but not knowing that there's an account manager on the other end that's fought to get that product on there, and that's really pushing to get those promos, or there's a supply team that's really pushing to get it out there, or there's an IT team running the online bits to it. So there is so much more education that's needed, particularly within what I'd say is our community and the kind of the black community, on roles that exist outside of sports and kind of acting and kind of more stardom type thing. It's just, and accountancy and kind of lawyers. It's actually these are the type of industries that exist.
It's such a, I've said it before, kind of an incestuous world really of FMCG, and it's based a lot on who you know, or you know someone who knows someone who can make a connection, and if you don't have those roots in, it can be really hard. And it's probably not the kind of career that you sit, when you're in sixth form, going through your A-levels thinking, oh, I know, I want, I think that about data and insight. How many people sit there thinking, oh, I want to be data scientists, or, there are some careers that they're almost overlooked. And I suppose it's our role, isn't it, to make sure that they're considered.
Yeah. And for me, so when I was at college, I managed to get the opportunity to do a 6-week internship at Tesco head office in finance. Absolutely hated it, but it was great because I could actually see the differences in what people were doing. They had a marketing department, they had a finance department, they had sales, supply. That opened my eyes up to a lot more than just kind of finishing college and not knowing what was out there and all of that kind of stuff really. So I think more opportunities like that, and that's what Sam is trying to create through AdSalt, will open up people's eyes, and they may not necessarily like it, but at least they know it exists, and there might be a role within a company that then suits them.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we're doing quite a few different things actually in this space. So we're working with Co-op at the moment on an initiative with some of their academies, with some of their sixth form students, running a competition, introducing them to the world of data and insight. Funnily enough, they have to create a new ready meal as part of the brief. But also our own Diversity Advantage program, which I know you're involved with. It's complementary, I suppose, to the work that Sam and Lucy are doing over in AdSalt, because what we're trying to do is to help brands who are already, they're already out there. Like obviously, Jim Kitchen is already out there, but how can we use the information, the insight, the data, everything we've got at our disposal to help to expand the brand and to become even more successful? So what's your experience of being on the part of the Diversity Advantage program?
Oh, brilliant. It's been so good, because as a small business, it's already hard to just get access to data and information, let alone, kind of being a real small business, a black-owned business. So, kind of for us, it really is about how we use that data to then convince the retailers. It just gives us access to so much, I'd say, and it's just enhanced the way that we communicate and we talk to retailers. So, like I was saying to Dan the other day, really, really grateful. Dan is the head of the MD at IRI. And yeah, I was just saying that we're really, really grateful for being on that program and for it just giving us the access to that data, because it's just invaluable insight.
Great, that's your experience, and I think in a way you're lucky, because your background, you were already in FMCG, so you were already aware of the data that was available. But if you're starting out and you don't have experience of FMCG, I can't even imagine how you would find the information that you need in order to have a credible conversation with a retailer, because we know that retailers aren't necessarily interested in your brand, they're interested in the category. And if you don't know that and you don't have access to the wider category information, how do you even have that conversation?
Exactly. And you know what, when I speak to a lot of other kind of smaller brands, they say, look, I've got this idea, how can I just launch it on shelf? And I just say, look, I wish it was as easy as that. You've got to do a lot of deep diving and understanding, what's declining, what's winning. Is there actually a gap? Is what you're just bringing just another, kind of iteration of something they've got already? Why would they remove something on shelf to put your product on there, not knowing that you're going to double, kind of what they take off? Why they're going to make that risk? The buyers are so busy. Like, I try not to bug them because I know how busy they are. So I just go to them with the important things, and when we really just want to, we need to push and we need to do stuff to take us to the next level. But I know how busy they are, because they've got not just me, but 100 other people like me also sending them the exact same stuff on there's a gap here. So you really do need to make sure that what you're doing is, you're using that information in the right way to really stand out, to then, kind of push that, whether it's a listing or extra distribution or more SKUs or tweaks, just doing it that way.
So one of the things that we talk about at IRI is being aligned with the retailer strategy. So obviously you've got your own brand strategy, you've got your own brand objectives, but it's so important to make sure that they align with what the retailer is trying to achieve. And they're not all trying to achieve necessarily, they might all be wanting the same objective, but they're not going to get to it in the same way. The strategies to get there are different. So what's your experience of that, having to tweak and position slightly differently?
Yeah, so I guess one of the examples really is, Asda, and they're competing against some of the discounters, for instance. So for us, we're on an everyday kind of promo that happens within there. So we know that, well, within Asda, we're going to make less, but we're going to have a big range that we push out there. So whereas with Co-op, it's actually a more convenient solution, isn't it? And the price is a bit higher, and then but you've got customers that can't access an Asda that can access a Co-op. So, you've almost got that great balance, really. So for us, it works perfectly well, because Asda don't yet have that real convenience arm, which they're obviously building. And then Co-op is that convenience arm, which they're really established in. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's kind of how we flex it, really. Just looking to the future, it's understanding, what areas does Asda want to play in, what areas does Co-op want to play in, where are they taking the business? Is it price? Is it promotions? Is it more SKUs? Is it range? What does that look like? And that's how we then start to shape what we're doing. Is it exclusivity? So does Asda want exclusive products, for instance? That kind of thing really is what we then do. But we have close conversations with each retailer to map out what the next year looks like.
Just thinking about retailers then and your interactions with retailers, what's the process then that you went through to get a listing?
It's a really interesting one because obviously I was already in the industry, so I kind of knew how to go about it. But for me, it was still an eye-opener because a buyer listening to a small brand is very different from a buyer listening to a big brand week in, week out. So the process, it kind of starts off with finding the buyer's details, of course. And that can be done via LinkedIn. It can be done via putting their names together and then the email address. And then you've almost got to send across like what I'd call a one-pager. And that one-pager would just give them some insight into the brand. So it could say, this is where the category is currently. This is where the gap is. This is what my proposition is. And this is how it basically helps achieve what you need to achieve. And if you can tailor that into actually a retailer proposition in talking their language and using their kind of branding as well, then that gives them a lot of insight. So from there, you then send that across to the buyer. You might not get a response straight away because, as I said, the buyers are extremely busy. Then if they do come back to you, they might say, can you send us a little bit more information? Can you send some samples in, etc. From that, it used to be send some samples in so that they could try the product and then see what it tastes like before actually getting a meeting, because you can imagine they can't just take meetings with everybody. Let's try the product first of all and then see what happens. So after that, you could then get a meeting in with the buyer, tell them what you're going to do, and in terms of it's all more explaining your kind of 4-piece intro pager, just explaining that in more detail, talking about the brand, what you're going to do, who the shopper is. I used some videos as well on me actually speaking to some of the shoppers outside of their shop, which is always good, always goes down well, because that's actually their consumer telling you that this is a gap. So then after that, hopefully it's gone successful. The buyer will then start asking for commercials. So what cost price are you going to give them, payment terms, and all of that kind of stuff. And then hopefully that then leads to what you'd consider a retailer listing. So they'd say, we're going to launch X amount of products in X amount of stores on X date. For people that don't have the supply chain already set up, there's a lot of stuff that you'll have to then do behind the scenes on supply chain and et cetera and everything like that. But for us, we were okay because our manufacturer is already set up as a supplier to Asda and Co-op and everybody else, so it's a lot easier. But if you're a small, real independent brand, then there's figuring out that piece of how do you get the product to the retailer. And one thing I actually forgot to mention before you do any of this is make sure that you've got a product that comes out of a factory that's either BRC or SALSA certified, because it's that retailers can't just take stuff that's made in your kitchen. It has to be made in a safe factory because obviously of health and safety with consumers. Some retailers take SALSA, some only take BRC. And then obviously you get the retailer listing, and then you do everything you can to make sure that it works, because that is going to be the test bed of whether you grow or whether you get delisted and you've kind of no longer got a brand. So it really is making it work. And the best thing for small companies to do is actually to start off in one of the smaller retailers like independent, online, etc., and build up a bit of a following there, so that then actually it's easier to translate to the supermarkets. The reason that I didn't do that was because I wanted to be a little bit different, and also the MOQs, so minimum order quantities, were too high to go to some of the smaller retailers. So if you do have that opportunity, build it in independence, build it in on online D2C, show that you've got a customer case, and then start going to the supermarkets, because once you get there, you want to make sure that you stay there.
That is really, really good advice. I think that anyone listening to this who is starting up their own brand would find that invaluable. Thank you. Just a thought, actually, when you knowing that Asda took you on as a bit of a trial, How did you come to an agreement with Asda around what the trial benchmarks would be? What were the KPIs for success, and what was the thinking that went into that?
The KPIs for success were benchmarking what they would currently do on a product that they took out to put us in, basically. So as long as we achieved more than that, then we were successful, of course. And yeah, we did so much more than that. And now, yeah, it is growing and growing. Hence the fact that, we went from just having 4 SKUs to having 6 SKUs to just last week, we've now got 12 SKUs in total in Asda. So it's amazing. Well, this week we've just launched our 6 new SKUs, so 12 in total. So as you can imagine, it's doing really well for them and for us, and it's great. And it's just about continuing to build that.
So, slightly different tangent, just to touch on something that you mentioned before about being a Black-owned brand. How much of an influence did that have on the way you approached the building of your brand and your go-to-market strategy? Did you even acknowledge that it was a thing at that time?
No, so I didn't at all, because what I think that the best businesses should win. I think that I just think we should not be disadvantaged because someone's, Black or Asian or a woman. I just don't. That's what I think. So when building this initially, I didn't even think anything about it until obviously the George Floyd murder happened. That's when everybody started to wake up, and then it started to make me think, actually, should I be shouting more about, look, this is a Black-owned business? But before that, for me, it was just about, I want to create a fantastic company. I don't need people to say, it's Black-owned, it's this, is that. I just want people to love the meals, love the price, love the product, and just buy into the brand and what the brand stands for.
Yes, and as a woman being listed in yes, obviously I agree with that. I think when we talk about diversity or lack of diversity in the retail industry, it's from several angles, isn't it? It's one, the products, the solutions, whatever they be that are available should reflect our society, and in that sense. It doesn't currently. And I think also, to the point we mentioned earlier around being an inspiration, showing that there are, opportunities in other industries that maybe people didn't think about, that's also important. So there's two angles to it, isn't there? There's the angle for the consumer, and then there's the angle for us as people, as young people, to find new career pathways.
That's it, yeah. And I guess to even step back a little bit as well, we are disadvantaged in a sense where, we don't have the connections, we don't have the contacts to raise investment, where people would have family and friend rounds where they can stick in, to 100, 200 grand. We just haven't got that because our, kind of our parents are, we're first generation. So they've come here with nothing. So it's actually them now just building to get somewhere. So I speak for me anyway, not everybody obviously has the same situation, but it's almost like, so where would I go for investment, or where would I go for help, or where would I go for a retail connection where somebody else's parent might be able to ring up the CEO of X to say, hey, can you help us out? We just don't have that. And that's how I want to try and make it a level playing field, but a level playing field by have the best businesses, create the best product, create the best proposition, and just don't disadvantage me. If I need access to a retailer, I need to get access to a retailer. So there's kind of two elements to it, and it's how you bring those elements together is what I think.
So if we were thinking of people out there that are kind of startups or thinking of creating a new brand, what would be your top tips? If you were forced to list like 5 top tips for startups, what would they be?
So the first one, I guess it would have to be, do something that you're actually passionate about, and not for money. And the reason that I say that is because I worked part-time for probably about 3 or 4 years just whilst building this. So losing out on extra income that I could be getting from working full-time, but knowing that one day, hopefully, this thing will pay off because I know that there is a gap within it. So when all of those kind of knockbacks come, you still keep going because you actually are passionate about it and you do believe in it. Otherwise, you just end up quitting super quickly. So I'd say don't waste your time and definitely be passionate about it. I'd say you have to learn to fail. You also have to not want to fail, but you have to just accept failure. Not everything's going to work. And one of the examples the other day was when COVID happened, couldn't get our products because obviously everything had to come off of shelf. Toilet roll was the main thing that was being purchased, and some chicken. And it was a real challenge, but the customers were crying out for stuff from us. So we just thought, okay, we're going to launch some protein powders. And they absolutely bombed. Nobody bought them. And in hindsight, the right thing to do would have just been to wait and just find ways to, get our ready meals, kind of in and around. But actually, we just went to go and launch protein powders. We know exactly why they bombed, because people buy from the bigger companies. They don't necessarily need to buy from us. And we didn't have the economies of scale to hit the same prices as them. But it's a learning curve. You have to fail at something so that then later down the line, you'll actually think a lot further ahead on, actually, maybe that's not the right thing to do, and it's just a knee-jerk reaction. Another thing I'd say is always be willing to learn. The willingness to learn that you need to have in this startup industry, just in life in general even, is far beyond anything. Just reading books, read up on your industry, understand what's going on with the different retailers, what's their strategy. And this can be translated into everybody else in any other industry as well. If you're in tech, it's what's going on in the tech industry, who's raising what, who's doing what. And actually you could just simply just read a name in an article that you could then hit up on LinkedIn and then just start connecting with. So it's things like that. I'd say networking as well. Network, obviously pre-COVID, networking was great. But I say networking in not necessarily just going and meeting people with an agenda, but actually just meet people and speak to people for the sake of meeting people and speaking to people. And you won't even understand how far that gets you. One conversation just leads to another conversation. And before you know it, you're in a room with a CEO of a retailer that you've just no idea, you're questioning why you're here, kind of thing. So, I guess they're kind of top tips.
I love those tips. They are great tips. They're applicable, as you say, to any career. So finally then, what's the future for Jim Kitchen?
We really do want to be the go-to brand for healthy eating. You see Weight Watchers, you see Slimming World, and they are specific in, it's either about a specific community or it's about too far down to weight loss. We want people to fall in love with food again. We want to create great tasting, healthy food that people just love and, want to come to us as the brand. So I see it as different categories and different retailers, just really just creating that brand and almost looking at what Wicked Kitchen have done in Tesco. And it's almost like, how can we emulate something similar to that within the health and wellness atmosphere, really? And that is where I see the future of the Jim Kitchen.
And presumably going beyond ready meals, I'm guessing.
Absolutely, yeah. So ready meals, ready to cook, so many different areas. Is it drinks? There are a lot of things that we're looking at the minute, because like I said, we want to build more than just a ready meal brand. We want to build it as a lifestyle proposition where, you can just say that I live and breathe the Jim Kitchen. That's what I would love for consumers to be able to do at some point in this journey, whether that's the next year, 2 years, 3 years. That's where we see it, really.
Just it's an exciting ambition, isn't it? And I wish you all the best in the future. So thank you for joining us today, Segun. I got a lot out of today. I think that the key themes for me, apart from the main ones of kind of resilience and stamina, those ones around really understanding the consumer and the shopper, really partnering with your retailer to give them the information that they need, really important. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Take care, and we'll see you soon.
Take care. See you soon. Thank you so much, Laurie.
Thank you for listening. Keep a lookout for another episode of the FMCG In-Crowd.